Fallout Equestria the Chrysalis, Chapter 10, Part 2. It was probably half an hour later that Silverline rose, whispering a few gentle words to her daughter before carefully and quietly walking my way. I met her with a tiny, gentle smile.
"I'm sorry to disturb you,"
she whispered, barely audible with the way she hung back from me.
"My daughter is... well, she's having a lot of trouble sleeping, and I was wondering if you might have something that could help her?"
My smile wilted in sympathy, but after a moment of thought, I forced it back.
"I might be able to find something."
I got up and quietly approached the slumbering form of Starlight. I whispered her name, but received no reply. After a few seconds of contemplation, I leaned down to nudge open her bags, pulling out the medical supplies. And Starlight murmured,
"Huh?"
As her eyes cracked open only a tiny bit to look at me, I just smiled back.
I just need a painkiller. Go back to sleep."
Her eyes closed, murmuring something indistinct. A few moments later, I found the bottle that I was looking for. I opened it, retrieving a single pill before closing the bottle again and returning the medical supplies to Starlight's bags. Then, I slipped away again, returning to Silverline.
"Here you go."
I whispered as I offered her the pill.
"It's a strong painkiller. I had to use it once. It put me right out. I didn't even think I dreamed that night."
She swallowed as she gingerly took the pill in one hoof.
"Thank you,"
she whispered, her voice growing thick and dim in the light. I was fairly sure I saw her blinking back tears. She quickly turned away, hobbling on three legs, as she made her way back to her daughter. There were a few more whispers and some shuffling as Silverline fetched the water bottle. Soon, they settled down, and this time, they were still. The rest of my watch passed in silence. I slept like a rock, once Dusty relieved me, and that surprised me. When I had laid down, anxiety had been gnawing at my gut. In just a few short hours, I'd seen such extreme violence, witnessed the aftermath of atrocities, and nearly died. While Silverline and Quicksilver had my sympathies, it was the last one that weighed heaviest on my mind. My hive may be well depending on me, and if I died, I would have failed them all. So, I took it as a sign of just how exhausting and draining the previous week or so had been that I remember nothing after pulling the blanket over my shoulders. Starlight told me afterwards that she prodded me for almost a full minute before my eyes finally opened to the dim pre-dawn light. The first few minutes of morning went by in an indistinct blur. Mostly, I just remember feeling miserable. I think I felt more tired than I had before going to sleep. And breakfast was quick, as Starlight and I shared a quick meal of a few vegetables and a can of baked beans. Then, we were packing to go. Quicksilver looked as tired as I did, struggling to keep her eyes open as she sat there, while her mother bundled up their bedding. As soon as she finished, Silverline whispered a few words to her daughter before walking up to us. There was a fresh sense of determination to her. She still looked cautious, but not cowed.
I wanted to thank you for what you did."
Dusty gave a half smile. "Well, I'm glad we could help, ma'am." Both Starlight and I echoed the sentiment. Sickle just took another sip from a dark bottle, making some weak rumble. While it was hard to tell under the helmet, even with the steel muzzle dangling free at the side, I got the impression that she was as tired as I was.
"And I'm glad that you did,"
Silverline said, nodding shakily.
"We had nearly given up hope that, well, any pony was coming for us, that anyone even cared."
Dusty's ears drooped as he glanced our way before speaking again. I'm sorry to say it, but we had no idea that you were there. We were in the area for a job. We just happened to come across you. And damn glad we did, too." It struck me as harsh, as if he were dashing her hopes that some pony had been looking out for them, and I probably would have omitted that detail myself, but still, she was bound to discover the truth eventually.
"Oh,"
she said, ears drooping a bit.
"Then thank the goddesses that you found us."
She swallowed, her determination wavering for just a moment. Then, she took a deep breath, finding her resolve once more.
"Thank you for what you've done, but I have to get my daughter home. I can't offer you anything now, but if you ever make your way to Mereford, I'll do anything that I can to repay you for saving us."
"Now, hold on there," Dusty said, his ears perking up. That's not necessary, but did you just say Mereford? That's quite a ways away. How did you two end up here? She hesitated to answer, but only for a moment.
We were with a water caravan, coming back from rest.
What? Dusty's eyes widened. They hit the water caravan? Wait, what about the militia guards? I was surprised by the sharp edge of Silverline's voice.
There weren't any. Gun's been hiring mercenaries to guard the caravans for almost a year now, and they took off half an hour before the raiders even showed up.
Dusty's jaw dropped, followed by sputtering. They did what? The information troubled me as well. It didn't take a very cynical mind to draw a connection between the two events, and I turned to dig through my bags, seeking out the most immediate potential source of information. Q-Trip's notebook. I flipped through it until the writing stopped, then slowly made my way backwards, scanning over the randomly scribbled notes and pornographic doodles in hopes of finding anything that stood out. I found what I was looking for almost immediately. Every head turned to me as I read one note, scrawled along the side of the last page of writing.
Water caravan, rest to Mereford, 3 days, Rotwater Bridge, no guards. The last bit's underlined.
Dusty broke the following silence. Son of a bitch.
Well, that fucking explains it,
Sickle rumbled.
No wonder that dumbass was doing so well. Gutfuck got himself a patron. Shit.
Starlight murmured.
Someone's hiring raiders? Nah,
Sickle said with a sneer.
I'm sure those mercs just fucked off for the fun of it, and Gut was a fucking psychic.
Starlight rolled her eyes, grumbling under her breath. What the hell is Big Gun thinking? Dusty said, scowling. The militia is supposed to take care of stuff like this, and for that matter, why the hell does he have any say in it? Hardwood's the one in charge of that stuff.
Hardwood stepped down last year,
Silverline said.
Gun's in charge of Mereford now.
Dusty blinked, evidently surprised again. I know Big Guns wanted to be mayor for years, but how in the hay did that happen?
I don't know,
Silverline replied.
Politics was more my...
She cut herself off, trembling for a moment before speaking again.
It doesn't matter right now. I need to go and get my daughter home. Thank you for...
Now, hold on there, Dusty said, raising a hoof. Mereford's a long hike, and I'm not gonna leave a pair of unarmed ponies to do it alone. He stopped, mouth shuddering as he looked back at us, and continued. Well, I can't speak for any pony else, but I intend to make sure you get there safe. I'll go with you.
Us too,
Starlight quickly added before looking at me.
I mean, if that's okay with you. Oh, well, absolutely,
I said, giving a decisive nod, and Sickle dissented.
Fuck that.
She swept her hoof around, gesturing to all of us.
We're all going to Rust,
she said before pointing a hoof at Dusty.
So that you can pay me what you fucking owe me.
Relax, he said, scowling. We'll be going back to Rust. It's on its way. You'll get paid and we can all be on our way.
Right,
Sickle said, sitting back.
Good.
Dusty slowly nodded, then looked back to Starlight.
Long as that's all okay with you, that is.
Silverline swallowed as she nodded, her eyes glistening as she blinked.
Thank you.
No need to thank us, Dusty said, offering a smile. I'm just doing what's right. The smile faded quickly. Besides, I'd like to talk to Big Gun and find out what the hell he thinks he's doing, leaving ponies high and dry like that. Even with her eyes tearing up, that sharpness returned to Silverline's expression.
Me too.
That first day was almost entirely uneventful. There was fairly little talking, and the scenery hadn't been that pretty even before the apocalypse. We stopped for lunch, breaking out another can each, and Dusty even offered Silverline and Quicksilver some of his cigarettes, though they declined. While we ate and rested, I poured through the contents of the data store. It tried to resist me. The moment I tried to pull up a file, my portable terminal beeped and froze. I flipped a switch, changing modes to peer at the crude spell matrix built into the data store and the malicious bit of code it had tried to execute. It was small, but it was effective as well. If I had been using a regular terminal, the resulting spell would have caused its spell matrix to implode. Restarting it would have required a rather lengthy and difficult process, made all the more difficult for not having the proper tools on me. Instead, I smiled, stabbed a button with my hoof, and killed the vicious little spell before it could form. I released my terminal's ironclad grip on the data store's spell matrix processes, and began pursuing the thousands of files contained within. It was far too much to give more than a cursory skimming before we would have to hoof it over to Amber. If I was going to give the data the proper analysis that it deserved, I needed more time. To do so, I turned to Starlight. Her hoof raised protectively to her Pip-Buck when I mentioned my plan.
But why do you have to use this? Don't you have a data store? And didn't you say that one there has some dangerous spell in it? Well, my data store is damaged,
I said, resisting the urge to wilt at its mention.
Well, I hope I can recover the information on it, but if I copy more onto it, it could destroy what's already there. My terminal has almost no storage, so your Pip-Buck is the only other option. As for the spell, it's not dangerous. I'll be copying the data through my terminal, and that means the data store can only do something if I allow it. Even if that didn't work, it would hit my terminal, not your Pip-Buck.
It took a bit more convincing, including some technical details that appeared to go well over her head, before she reluctantly passed her Pip-Buck to me. I plugged in both devices, and the transfer went off without a hitch, much to Starlight's relief. Fortunately, Starlight considered me a good enough of a friend to trust me further with her precious Pip-Buck. I had taken a spare strap from one of the bags Sickle carried through the day, and crudely fastened them to my terminal. The intent had been to keep it slung around my neck, like some crude and bulky mockery of Starlight's setup, in order to get a bit of reading during the trip. Of course, that promised to be incredibly awkward, with what the tiny screen bouncing around on the bulky device looked like, not to mention putting that much weight on my neck. When she discovered my intention, she laughed and offered to let me carry her Pip-Buck while we traveled, much to my neck's relief. I hugged her in thanks. It was still awkward, naturally. The screen was actually larger than my portable terminals, but I had to either stop walking or go on 3 legs whenever I needed to scroll or change files. At least I could get a little reading while we traveled. Emphasis on a little. There's only so much reading I can do from a bouncing screen while stumbling along uneven ground before my head starts to feel distinctly fuzzy. The entire day's worth of reading while walking probably added up to less than half an hour of reading while resting or eating, but at least it let me feel as if I were doing something with my time.